Hello trumpet players, today I'm finally getting around to making a video about the tonalization studies. Now before I start talking about what my tonalization studies are, I understand that there are other people who use that term for other things. If I had known that, I named my exercises before the internet. And if I had the internet back then, I would have looked and seen someone else already took that name. Um, but yes, I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything like that. This is just the way it came out. So my tonalization studies are a series of scale studies. They're different from traditional scales in three different ways. More than that, but basically three different ways. One is the range of the scales. Every scale goes your full range, and that's true no matter where your range is at. So if you're a beginner and your range only goes to here, the scale goes up to that and then down to the low F sharp. But if you, let's say you play up to super C, in theory, I don't sell those scales, but in theory, those scales go all the way up to super C. So that's the first difference, is the full range. And you can see why that would be an issue. If you practice the traditional scales, let's say you're doing E, 4 sharps, right? You never get to work on E below the bottom line of the staff. You're never really drilling those fingerings in that key in the lower register. So in that regard, these exercises are already better than the traditional scales. All right. So the second thing that makes them different is I do comprehensive variations. And the best way to demonstrate that, the traditional scales turn around on themselves. So if you're doing thirds, for example, and that's fine, but I do 4 different variations on the same thirds so that we get all 4 possibilities that can be done with slurs. So we go, first time is always up. And once again, remember, we're going through your full range. Then we do descending thirds. Okay, then we alternate ascending, descending. Then we do the other alternation. Okay, so every pattern that we do is part of that 4 variation thing. So it does it with the 3-note pattern, 4-note pattern, thirds, fourths. We do now these are I call this the bare minimum. The 3-note pattern, 4-note pattern, thirds, fourths, and triads. If you do all 4 of those variations for all sets of these patterns, then it's 20 exercises total. That once again, that's the bare minimum. We do have more advanced ones that I teach, but not as often, obviously. We have the better players at the top, fewer of them, right? So that's why I don't do as many of those. Anyway, the next biggest difference about the tonalization studies is that you're not supposed to do them in every key. You're supposed to do them in one key. And this was inspired by back in the days when we were still doing LPs, records, I was in the UTEP music library listening to a Charlie Parker record, and I was reading the record cover while I was listening. And this cover said that someone had seen Charlie Parker practicing all day. He went into the room, practiced all day, didn't come out until the day was over, and they said that he practiced in the same key the whole time. Let that sink in. Charlie Parker, the same key all day. Okay? That got me thinking. And I had already done what people teach, that you do everything in every key. And what that does, it's not that that's bad. I'm not saying that's bad, but it gives you finger technique. It gives you nothing here. So like thirds, if you're going to do thirds in every key, it would be like this, right? Right? When you do it that way, you get lots and lots of finger technique. But your mind doesn't develop the way it does when you play in one key for a long time. You do all the stuff that you have to do, but in one key. And that changes the way you perceive that key. It changes the way you think in that key. And this is, by the way, the most important difference in the way that the tonalization studies work. Because most of the other scales, I don't remember anyone actually doing the tonalization studies in any books that I've ever seen, or a clinician. I've never heard anyone say, do only one key. They all say, almost always, um, every key, right? Well, that's not helping you think in the key. I like to compare it to trying to learn 12 languages, because each key to me is sort of like a different language. Imagine you're trying to learn 12 languages at the same time. So you learn hello in every language. You learn goodbye in every language. Then you learn where's the bathroom in every language. Then you learn, you see what I'm saying? You know, after 5 years of doing that, you wouldn't know any of them. You wouldn't be able to speak any of those languages. You spend time in one language, and then later you go to another language. So yes, I believe there's power in this. When we first start the students, we want to do at least 1 week. Now, like the beginners, I like to do them for months on each key, because they're only going to do 3 keys anyway, right? So maybe 2 months on C, 2 months on F, 2 months on G. Then they're going to graduate to the next level, and we'll do it all over again. And maybe this time we'll do 1 week. But there's a point in time where they become better, and they don't need to learn all the scales anymore because they've mastered them, where I'll have them actually do a key a month. That means it takes a whole year to get all the way through all 12 keys. That's an amazing thing. And this is what the tonalization studies are all about, is it's sort of like brainwashing your brain, brainwashing your mind to think saturated in that key. Now, what are the benefits of that saturation? Finger technique. I don't teach or practice finger technique exercises anymore. I think they're redundant. And if you've been watching my videos, I'm almost certain I've said this before. I hate redundancy. I'd like to be thorough, but the cost of being thorough is that it takes so much time. And it really irritates me if I have to do something twice, right? So, for the sake of avoiding the redundancy, I do not do finger technique exercises, because the stuff that we do, well, if you're practicing the tonalization studies, you're practicing arpeggios, you're practicing stuff like that, you're getting all of that. And you're getting it in a way that is so much more powerful than any made up finger technique exercise that you can find. So, second thing, intonation. Now, the way the tonalizations work on your subconscious mind is sort of like the way that Dr. Seuss works, right? You get used to that pattern. You get used to, um, hearing that last syllable again and again and again. That's why I actually saw an interview with Dr. Seuss. That's not his real name, but the author of the Dr. Seuss books, and he was talking about that, and I recognized the relationship between that and the tonalization exercises. It's the same thing. You have that pattern repeating, 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 and it soaks into your mind, and you start hearing music in a different way. Well, that hearing affects your tonalization, your intonation. It affects your intonation. You start playing better in tune because you're hearing the scale better. Our intonation comes from the scale. That's how we decided. It's the scales are based on the overtone series, and when you play the scales, you're getting the overtone series and you're getting the intonation. You're training your ear by just playing these exercises. It's amazing. It's wonderful. I actually tell people that these exercises, when you do them, it's almost magical. That's how wonderful they are. Now, it also helps your tone because being more in tune is always going to make you play with a better sound. And there's other things too that help your tone. They're supposed to be played as a flow study. Flow studies help your sound. You're going to get a better tone. All right. The next one is your range. Let's say you're doing the bare minimum. The bare minimum is 20 exercises. You're doing these 20 exercises over your full range. 20 of them. You're going to your top note, you're going to the bottom note. Then you're going to do it over again to the next one, top note to the bottom note. It's wonderful for your range. And another way that it helps your range is that you're now starting, remember what we said about hearing the notes, right? You're training your ear. Well, you're also training your ear at the higher registers. That's usually the biggest problem with high notes, is that you can't hear what you're doing. You're not used to hearing those notes. Well, if you're doing the tonalization studies, playing these 20 patterns every day up to your top range, that's not a problem anymore, is it? So yes, the tonalization studies are wonderful for your range. They're also real good for your endurance because they're pretty long. Because you're taking these patterns up to your top range, down to your bottom range, and then back to the original tonic note. You do that, you're spending time on your face. You're getting that endurance. It's also, endurance is also less of an issue when you play better in tune, when your air is doing better. Remember, there are flow studies, right? So flow studies are also going to help your endurance because you're learning to use your air correctly. Stuttering too much today. All right. Next, sight reading. Now, you're like, these are scales. How's that going to help your sight reading? But if you can think in that key, it's like thinking in a language, right? If you speak another language, you can think in that language. I only know that by theory. I can't speak any other language, but um, but that's what I've heard, is that you can think in that language. That's what we want for the key. If you know the key so well, your mind, your conscious mind, is now free to think about other stuff, right? And that's wonderful. You can now think about rhythms. You can now think about the roadmap. You can now think about dynamics because you're not thinking about the notes. You don't have to keep track of all that. And by the way, I like to tell my students that these patterns that we're doing are the main building blocks of music. With the exception of some of the chromatic stuff, you're covering in these tonalization studies all of the major building blocks that music is built out of. If you combine this with also practicing arpeggios, you've got it all, with the exception of some of the chromatic stuff. But you know what? The tonalization studies can also be applied to chromatic scale too. So there, you got it. All right? So sight reading, this is one of the best things you can ever do. And it's people say, well, the way you improve your sight reading is to just sight read. No, that's not the only way to do it. If you become so good at one of the aspects of playing that you don't have to think about it anymore, your sight reading will get better. Okay? All right, next, improvisation. I don't know if everybody thinks this way, but I think this way. When I'm improvising in the key. I'm consciously aware at all times what key I'm in, and I'm playing in that key. That's the language that I'm speaking. Besides the rhythmic language, the harmonic language that I'm speaking is based on the key that I'm playing in. Now, sometimes the key is like whole tone or something more advanced, uh, but it's still a key, the way I see it. In improvisation, we would call this horizontal improvisation because it's based on. Now, I don't only play horizontally, I also play vertically. But even when I'm playing vertically, I'm playing vertically over the framework of a horizontal foundation. So, yes, this is. And you know what? Some people will say, well, the tonalization studies give you material to use. So you can play. Um, So everything that I just played is stuff that you would get from your tonalization studies. And yes, there's a degree of truth to that. The only thing I would say about that is you shouldn't be playing scales in your improvisation, okay? Don't play scales. Now, if the scales come out, that's one thing. But if what's originating in your thought is, hey, let me play this scale right here, then that's not jazz, in my opinion. Um, that's not jazz. The thoughts that we have should lead towards scale patterns and stuff like that. But if the originating thought is, hey, let me play this scale here or this pattern here, I don't see that. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that's not jazz. Let me say that that's not music. You're not thinking musical thoughts, you're thinking technical thoughts. There's people get all worked up to, if you play technical, then they don't. There's people on both sides. They want to hear the technique. They don't want to hear the technique. My issue is whatever you're thinking, that's what I'm hearing, and I think it's true for everybody. If you're thinking scales, that's what I'm hearing scales, and it's not nice. All right. If you're thinking scales, I'm hearing scales. It's not pretty. If you're thinking music and scales come out, I'm hearing music. Let that sink in. I'm going to say it again because this is important. If you're thinking, I know it's a tangent, if you're thinking music and scales come out, I'm hearing music, not scales. All right? So, yes, in that regard, yes, it's going to help give you the technique that you need to play what you hear. And that's what we're talking about now. In improvisation, the way the tonalization studies benefit your jazz improv is by giving you the technique to explore a tonal center. All right? Okay, there's one more phrasing. How does the tonalization studies help your phrasing? Because they're supposed to be played as flow studies, and flow studies help your phrasing. They help you they help you with the phrasing indirectly because what we want when we do this is a completely steady flow of air. We don't want So we don't want... See how I'm changing the air? We don't want that. We want it smooth sailing all the way. Okay, you see that? When you have the skill to make everything steady like that, then you also have the skill to make a beautiful phrase. All right? So that's what tonalizations are. That's I showed you how they're different. They're different because they cover the full range. They have 4 variations of each of the patterns, and they're to be done all of the patterns in one key, not each pattern in all keys. Okay, that's how they're different, and they benefit your finger technique, your intonation, your tone, your range, your endurance, your sight reading, your improv, and your phrasing. I tell my students this is the most important and most powerful exercise that I teach. And you know, those of you who only know me through YouTube, if you're going to take something away from me, that's the most important, most valuable thing away from me that I'm teaching. It's the tonalization studies. Now, I know I've referenced them in some of the other videos. I hadn't made the video yet about them, but this is it. This is by far the most powerful, most beneficial exercise that I teach. There are other things that I teach that are equally important and equally beneficial, equally powerful, but they're not exercises. They're more like techniques. This, in terms, and you know what? I've written a lot of exercises. I've written books and books and books of exercises. These are the most important. You do this, and you know, maybe we'll have another video later about, you know, the tweaking of how to play the exercises, how to do them correctly, because there are some things that I've learned over the years. I invented these exercises in 1986 or 7. I think it's 86. I invented these, and it might be a little earlier than that, but anyway, it's been decades. Over the course of decades teaching these exercises, I've learned certain ways to get the most benefit out of it. They're already beneficial already by themselves. But there's certain things you can do while you're doing the exercises that make them even more beneficial. And maybe we'll have a video about that later. Okay? So, now, where do you get these exercises? I sell some of these books in different areas. There's an abbreviated version of them in my routine books. So if you buy any of the routine books, if you buy the daily routines book, daily routines for trumpet, there'll be an abbreviated version in there. And if you buy the Chops Express book, you'll get some of that in there. And the new Chops series coming out, so right now there's only one of them, the Trumpet Chops Pro book, that's in there too. Okay, those are the abbreviated ones. We also have up for the people who can play up to G above the staff. We have written out the bare minimum. You can either get that in the All-State Prep book, or you can get that in the Total Tonalization. I believe there's tonalization books also for different levels. I just know that it's not complete. I haven't finished writing them all out yet. And the reason for that is usually by the time my students get that far, they can do it by ear or just by memory, and it doesn't need to be written out. So that's why I have more of the lower ones published and less of the higher ones, because my students don't need the higher ones. They can just figure that out on their own. By the time they get there, they've been doing it for years, and they just don't need it anymore. So if you're interested in these exercises, You can get them in my books. I will put links in the description below so that you can, some of them might have affiliate things on it, so don't be afraid of that. Uh, if you go to Sheet Music Plus, there'll be an affiliate link. But there's other places to get some of these books too. So, in fact, if you go to the website, eddielewis.com, all the information you need about where to buy the books is there. All right. If you have any questions about these exercises, please feel free to ask below. Um, Other than that, I will see you on the next video. God bless you.